She walked into the hotel she built, only to be told she didn't belong there. What the staff didn't know. The black woman they tried to humiliate was their billionaire CEO, and the next 5 minutes would change everything. Dear viewer, what you are about to witness is not just a story. It is a powerful testament to the quiet power and pursuit of justice in places most people ignore. If this is your first time here, I warmly invite you to share where you are watching in the comments below. And if stories like this move, you challenge you, or make you think, consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon. We share voices that deserve to be heard every day. Thank you for being here. Now let's get into the story. She walked into the lobby of the Avalon Regency Hotel in downtown Chicago just before 9:00 a.m. on a crisp Tuesday morning. Clad in a denim jacket, weathered jeans, and sneakers that had clearly been worn through long walks, Ariel Dawson didn't look like someone who belonged there, or so the staff assumed. Her steps were calm, deliberate, like someone who knew exactly where she was going, even if everyone around her believed she didn't belong. But there was something else, something about the way she carried herself, that silenced the air around her. Behind the sleek marble desk, Brent Wallace stood, tall arms folded, scanning her with a sharp, silent judgment. The hotel's polished interior gleamed with gold accents and hushed jazz. Businessmen chatted over espresso in the lounge, socialites in designer coats waited on plush velvet couches, and no one expected the disruption that was about to unfold. Ariel reached the desk. She didn't fumble for words. She didn't over-explain. I have a reservation. Penthouse suite. Under Ariel Dawson, she said, with a voice smooth as still water, but heavy with authority. Brent didn't move. His smile was practiced professional, but it never reached his eyes. Are you sure you're in the right hotel? He asked, his tone louder than necessary. The penthouse isn't exactly for everyone. The sentence lingered like a slap in the air. Across the room, a woman lowered her magazine. A businessman paused mid-sip of his coffee. The whispering started not out of curiosity, but disbelief. Yet Ariel didn't blink. She simply tilted her head. Maybe you should check your system, she replied, calm, almost amused. Brent chuckled under his breath and leaned toward her with a mocking squint. Listen, I know our clientele. You're not on that list. He didn't whisper it. He didn't try to hide it. He said it as if it were policy. And perhaps for him it was. Standing nearby, two front desk clerks, Marcy and Tyler, exchanged glances. Marcy's smirk was thin, cruel. Tyler didn't look up from his keyboard. A security guard, arms crossed near the elevator, shifted his weight toward them, already assuming this woman was a problem. But Ariel remained composed. Not because she wasn't angry, she was. Because she had lived through this moment before. Too many times. And because she knew something none of them did. In 5 minutes, the entire hotel would know it too. She opened her small bag and handed over a sleek black credit card. Her name, Ariel Dawson, glinted in silver lettering. But Brent didn't take it. Instead, he waved to the security guard and muttered something into his radio. The word verification echoed faintly from Marcy's walkie-talkie. We'll need to hold this card for fraud inspection, Brent said with unearned authority. Standard protocol. He reached forward and took the card, turning his back to her as if dismissing her from the room. Then he opened the reception safe, slid the card in, and locked it with a definitive click that sounded louder than it should have. This is not a place where you can walk in and pretend to be someone you're not, he added. The words lit a spark in the crowd. Phones were pulled out. A few guests pretended not to record, but the red glow of cameras betrayed their curiosity. Someone whispered, "Is she really being kicked out?" Still, Ariel didn't move. She turned her gaze to Brent and said one sentence, one that would replay in the minds of every person in that lobby. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career." Brent scoffed. Then the doors behind her swung open. A woman in a tailored suit entered with purposeful steps. Her name was Camille Ariel's executive assistant. She nodded subtly, confirming what Ariel already knew. The ownership records had been pulled. The legal team had been alerted. The camera feeds were live. Ariel had come not just as a guest, but as the CEO of the very hotel she was being thrown out of. The entire Avalon Regency chain, in fact, bore her mark. She had built it, brick by brick, law by law, from nothing. And now, the people who ran it had just failed the most important test of all. She stepped back from the desk and calmly turned toward the guests, now whispering in clumps across the room. "I'd like everyone here to listen carefully," she said louder now. Her voice echoed under the chandelier's glow. "I am Ariel Dawson, and this hotel, this chain belongs to me." The room went still. Brent's face drained of color. Marcy dropped her walkie-talkie. Tyler stopped typing. "I built this business so that every guest, no matter what they wear, where they come from, or the color of their skin, is treated with respect. And today, in the lobby of my own hotel, you've shown me exactly who doesn't deserve to be here." No one moved. "You'll all be leaving shortly, not me." At that moment, across the hotel's internal servers, administrator access was revoked for Brent, Marcy, and Tyler. Their logins expired in real time. The safe that held her card clicked open remotely, and a new notification appeared on every staff terminal. New owner directive in progress. Executive orders to follow. And yet Ariel hadn't raised her voice once. She didn't need to. She had spoken the language of true power restraint, principle, and truth. But this wasn't just about one slap of disrespect. This was about a culture that had been allowed to fester behind velvet walls and polished floors. And Ariel Dawson had just turned the first key to exposing it all. What happened next would send shockwaves far beyond that lobby, and no one watching would ever forget the moment they witnessed a billionaire woman dressed in denim tear down a system built to exclude her. And she was just getting started. The moment Ariel Dawson revealed her identity in that echoing lobby, the air thickened with a stunned, almost paralyzing silence. But the shock that silenced the onlookers did not erase the deeper question, seeping through every wall of the Avalon Regency. How did it get to this? How had such quiet cruelty become so normal? For Ariel, the public moment was merely the surface ripple of something deeper and entrenched rot that had been quietly allowed to fester behind polite smiles and designer uniforms. Her brief but explosive encounter at the front desk wasn't a mistake. It was a symptom. And the more she looked around at the frozen faces of her employees and the guarded stares of the guests, the more she realized this moment had been long in the making. Camille, her assistant, stepped aside and handed her a printed report. Ariel didn't need to read it. She already knew what it said. Over the past 6 months, subtle signs had begun to emerge from the flagship hotel. A pattern of unverified complaints, booking errors affecting guests of color, and anonymous customer feedback, citing coldness or unfriendliness at check-in. At first it seemed scattered inconclusive, but now standing in the epicenter of it, it was no longer theory. It was reality raw and exposed. Brent Wallace stood stiff behind the desk. Color drained from his face. His lips parted as though grasping for a response that refused to come. He had spent years perfecting his polished persona. His evaluations had always emphasized his confidence, leadership, and high standards. But those same standards were what he used to quietly gatekeep, to decide who belonged and who didn't, not by credentials, but by assumption. It wasn't that Ariel wore plain clothes. It wasn't that she hadn't arrived with a show of wealth. It was the simple fact of her blackness paired with humility that triggered his assumptions. He didn't see a billionaire. He saw a stereotype, and without hesitation, he acted on it. Marcy, still by the computer, avoided eye contact now. Her smirk had disappeared, replaced with a shallow, panicked calm. Tyler, who had silently enabled the entire encounter with his silence, tapped nervously at his tablet, pretending to scroll. Neither of them said a word. Security officers hovered awkwardly nearby, awaiting instructions no one dared to give now. Ariel exhaled slowly, her voice low but firm. This moment was never about a single insult. She said her words aimed not just at Brent, but at the entire room. It's about the walls you build around people who don't fit your idea of luxury. The quiet daily decisions that make someone feel small, less than, unwelcome. That's the real virus here. And it lives in uniforms and job titles. The guests, those who had been whispering moments ago, now began to shift uncomfortably. Some were moved. Some were ashamed. One woman, dressed in a sleek black suit, took out her phone and put it away again, realizing this wasn't about viral content. It was about accountability. A hotel was supposed to be a place of warmth, of rest, of safety. Yet here, prejudice was being served behind the counter like a glass of wine, subtle, chilled, and far too easy to ignore. Camille moved behind the desk and opened the staff terminal with her override credentials. With every keystroke, she pulled up transaction logs, security footage, and the booking history. What she found confirmed what Ariel had long suspected. The front desk team had flagged multiple high-tier bookings for extra review when the guest's name or photograph suggested they might be Black, Latino, or simply not affluent enough by appearance. Brent had set the tone. Marcy and Tyler had followed. Ariel looked toward the front door, where more staff were gathering, summoned by the commotion. Among them was Angela Wu, the housekeeping manager who had worked for the hotel since its opening. She stood quietly, her eyes scanning the room, not in confusion, but recognition. She'd seen this before. Not this exact moment, but the culture behind it. And now she saw the system cracking. Angela stepped forward. "Miss Dawson," she said softly, "there's more you need to know. This isn't new. It didn't start today. There's a list they keep, an internal watch list for guests who don't fit the profile. Brent created it. I was told to report any room service requests from those guests directly to him, not through standard protocol." The room fell into shocked silence. Brent began to protest, but the look on Ariel's face stilled him. "How long?" she asked, voice sharp. Angela hesitated. 6 months, maybe more. Ariel turned to Brent. "And in that time, how many promotions have you received? How many bonuses? All while turning away the very people this hotel was built to welcome." Brent's voice cracked his defense, weak and desperate. "I was only protecting the brand." The image. Ariel cut him off with a raised hand. "No, you were protecting your prejudice. And you wrapped it in the language of luxury to make it sound respectable." Her words struck like thunder, and yet she never raised her voice. That was the power of truth, undeniable, steady, and searing. Angela stepped back into the crowd, but her words had already changed the room. More employees whispered now. Stories began to trickle out, quiet acknowledgments that what happened at that front desk wasn't just a mistake, it was a pattern, one that was known, one that was protected. Suddenly, what had seemed like an isolated moment was now a mirror held up to the face of the entire establishment. Ariel looked at each of them, her staff, her guests, the bystanders who had chosen silence. And then she said something none of them expected. I don't want to just fire people today. That's too easy. I want to confront what allowed this to happen in the first place. She stepped forward, past Brent, past Marcy and Tyler. She turned to the guests now holding phones loosely at their sides, unsure of what to do. You came here expecting luxury. Ask yourself, what does that mean? Is it marble floors and sparkling chandeliers? Or is it knowing that every person here is treated with dignity, no matter what they wear or what they look like? No one answered, because there was only one truth, and Ariel had just spoken it into the bones of that building. What came next wouldn't be quiet. It wouldn't be simple, but it would be honest. And that finally was the beginning of change. In the digital age, truth has a new witness the lens. It doesn't blink. It doesn't forget. It doesn't flinch when discomfort or shame fills a room. And that day, inside the gleaming lobby of the Avalon Regency, truth had arrived not just with Ariel Dawson, but with the quiet hum of recording devices and the electric pulse of live streaming apps flickering in the palms of witnesses who refused to look away. At first, the confrontation had seemed contained personal even. A CEO confronting a prejudiced front desk. A firing perhaps and a momentary scandal. But something more powerful stirred the moment Ariel's voice rose not in volume, but in clarity. That power was a visibility, the kind that couldn't be swept under marble tiles or buried in company memos. And it had a front row seat, courtesy of a woman named Jenna Morales. Jenna, a travel blogger and diversity advocate from Chicago, had been sitting quietly in the corner of the lobby cafe, sipping an overpriced espresso and finishing a post on inclusion in luxury spaces. She hadn't planned to film anything that day. But as she looked up from her laptop and saw the way Ariel dignified and still was being questioned, confronted and humiliated, something inside her shifted. By the time Brent Wallace called for security, Jenna had already pressed Go Lev. Her phone was angled discreetly but perfectly. The microphone captured every word, the contempt in Brent's voice, the gasps from onlookers, and Ariel's poised, searing responses. And soon, thousands of viewers began watching. The feed's title read simply, "Luxury Hotel Just Humiliated the Owner." In under 15 minutes, the live stream had crossed 50,000 viewers. Comments flew in rapid bursts. Is this for real? She's the owner. Fire them now. I'm done with these places. The public wasn't just watching, they were participating, bearing witness, refusing to look away. As Ariel made her statement to the crowd, the lobby transformed. Guests who had once been curious observers were now reluctant accomplices. The line between silence and complicity began to blur, and some of them shifted awkwardly, realizing their phones should have been raised too. Jenna continued recording, but this wasn't just about capturing injustice, it was about documenting what came next. Would Ariel react in anger or vengeance? Would she storm out? Would she falter? She did none of that. Instead, she walked to the center of the room and spoke as if the world had been waiting to hear her. "We say, 'This is a place of excellence,'" she said, gesturing around her. "But what kind of excellence excludes? What kind of excellence turns dignity into a privilege instead of a right?" Her voice was steady, but the pain beneath it trembled like a cello string drawn too tight. She wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for the voiceless guests who had been turned away quietly, workers who had been overlooked for promotions, and customers judged by color before comfort. Tyler, still behind the desk, seemed paralyzed by the spreading awareness. Brent tried to step forward and speak, perhaps to reclaim some sense of control, but Ariel raised a single hand, graceful, commanding, and he froze. He was no longer in charge of the room, and neither was his script. Jenna moved closer, her camera, now visible, drawing others to gather around. Her voice, calm but incredulous, narrated for those tuning in. "What you're witnessing right now is history. Ariel Dawson, owner of this hotel chain, is calling out systemic discrimination live in her own building." As if on cue, other guests began to record. Some hesitated, others didn't. Soon phones were everywhere. The hotel lobby became a digital coliseum, and the arrogance that once held the front desk now began to melt under a heat stronger than anger, truth paired with proof. From the mezzanine above, a young intern named Malik stood watching, heart pounding. He had spent months biting his tongue, seeing the patterns, the coded language, the selective errors and reservations. Now, for the first time, he saw a force powerful enough to tear through the polite armor of institutional bias. And it was all being filmed. When Ariel turned to address the cameras directly, it wasn't vanity, it was strategy. "To those of you watching," she said, looking into Jenna's lens, "understand this justice begins where silence ends. I didn't come here today to cause a scene. I came here because I believed this place, my place, stood for something better. But I see now that belief must be rebuilt." Her words rippled through the live stream like a stone thrown into still water. She hadn't raised her voice once, and yet she had silenced an entire institution. Suddenly, the PR director of the hotel, who had just arrived on scene, stepped forward. His name was Simon Caldwell, a polished man with media experience and a practiced smile. "Miss Dawson," he said, trying to assert composure, "perhaps we can move this conversation to a more private." No, Ariel cut in smoothly. "We've hidden these conversations behind closed doors for far too long. This is where it belongs. Out in the open, in front of the people who need to see it most." Simon faltered, then turned toward Jenna's camera with a tight smile. "Let's be clear. This situation was a misunderstanding." Jenna's voice cut in firm and unsparing. "Sir, she was told she didn't belong here. She was humiliated, and now the world is watching. Don't try to smooth over what we all heard." The crowd stirred. Ariel's eyes didn't leave Simon's. "You can't control the narrative anymore," she said. "The truth is out, and the cameras are still rolling." Jenna's stream hit 100,000 viewers, then 150,000. Comments exploded. Brands that had partnered with the hotel began issuing soft distancing statements. Influencers pledged to cancel their events. The story was now moving faster than any single person could contain. And still, Ariel stood in quiet command. When the hotel's security team, now uncertain of whom they actually served, asked if they should intervene further, Ariel shook her head. "No, let everyone film. Let the world see not just what happened, but what must change." In that moment, the cameras weren't just recording history, they were protecting it, ensuring that no spin, no apology drafted by committee could erase what had taken place. And so, as Ariel turned back to her staff and addressed them not as a furious executive, but as a disappointed leader determined to rebuild from ashes, the cameras kept rolling. And the camera never blinks. Silence doesn't always mean absence. It can be heavy with memory, loaded with guilt, brimming with choices unmade. That's the silence that filled the Avalon Regency's marble lobby the moment Ariel Dawson finished speaking. And in that pause, something shifted. The ground beneath every carefully constructed hierarchy began to crack. Brent Wallace, the hotel's acting general manager, no longer stood tall with authority. His shoulders had slumped, his face drained of color. His bravado collapsed under the weight of public outrage. His eyes darted around, searching for rescue, an explanation, a buffer, anything. But there was nothing left to shield him. The power had shifted. Everyone could feel it. Then came a voice no one expected. "I need to say something," it said, soft but resolute. All heads turned toward the front desk, where a young woman in a crisp gray vest stepped forward. Her name tag read, Eliza Monroe. She had been there the whole time, watching, absorbing, silently standing behind Brent as he led the charge of humiliation. But now, she couldn't remain invisible. Ariel's gaze met hers. Calm, patient. "I was told to stay quiet." Eliza began, her voice trembling slightly. "I was told that professionalism meant agreeing, that disagreeing meant insubordination. But what I witnessed today, what I've witnessed too many times, it's not professional. It's prejudice." The room held its breath. "I knew who you were the moment you walked in," she continued, eyes now fixed on Ariel. "I saw your name come through this morning. But when Brent asked if the guest had arrived and I said yes, he told me not to say anything. He said to let him handle it." Brent's face paled further. "That's not Eliza you're twisting, no sir." She interrupted, strength building in her voice. "You told me to stand back because you didn't want another scene like Chicago. I didn't know what that meant until now." The lobby rippled with whispers. The phrase, "another scene like Chicago," echoed ominously. Jenna Morales, still filming, turned her lens toward Eliza now, and the viewers leaned in. Eliza took a breath, and for the first time in her career, she didn't lower her eyes when speaking to a superior. "I've watched you question every black guest who checked in alone. I've seen reservations suddenly vanish from the system. And when I brought it up to HR, they told me I misunderstood protocol." Ariel stepped slightly forward, her voice low but clear. "You didn't misunderstand, Eliza. You saw it for what it was." Brent's voice cracked as he stepped forward. "This is getting out of hand. Eliza, you're a trainee. You don't understand the complexities of hotel operations. I understand the difference between complexity and cruelty," she said, cutting him off. The power dynamic had completely unraveled. And then another voice joined in. From the side entrance of the lobby, a woman in her early 50s tall, wearing a navy suit with a skyline badge on her blazer, entered the scene. The entire room turned toward her. It was Lorraine King Skyline's director of compliance. She'd received a dozen messages, frantic texts, and a link to Jenna's live stream. She had come in person. "I've seen enough," Lorraine said quietly. Brent stiffened. "Lorraine, thank God you're here. This is all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by social media. We should discuss this privately." Lorraine's eyes were like steel. "No, this will be handled exactly where it began, in front of everyone." She approached Ariel, nodding with professional respect. "Miss Dawson, I've already spoken with headquarters. Your authority, as always, is absolute. But, as Director of Compliance, I would like to offer formal backing to any decisions you make today. You're not alone in this. Ariel gave a quiet nod, and then she turned to the entire room, her voice like the calm eye in the center of a hurricane. For years, we have said Skyline Hospitality is inclusive. For years, some of our own people have used that shield to quietly perpetuate the very systems we claim to fight. But today, that ends. Not with hashtags, not with memos, with action. She turned toward Brent, who had begun to visibly sweat, his hands shaking. Brent Wallace, your employment is terminated effective immediately, she said, without raising her voice. All access revoked. Your conduct has not only violated our values, it has damaged our integrity. Security moved quietly, respectfully. Brent stood frozen, unable to protest. But Ariel wasn't finished. She looked back at Eliza. You had the courage to speak truth, even when it meant risking everything. That's the kind of leadership Skyline needs. Eliza's eyes widened. Miss Dawson, I didn't say any of this to gain anything. I know, Ariel replied. That's why you deserve more. Starting today, you'll be mentored under our leadership initiative for ethical hospitality. If you accept, your first assignment will be to help build anti-bias training for all front-facing staff. Emotion welled in Eliza's eyes. She nodded silently. In that moment, something monumental happened in the room. Not just a reckoning, but a reversal. The invisible had become seen. The silent were speaking, and the ones who had once dictated respect were now being held accountable by it. Jenna's camera panned slowly across the space, capturing not just scandal, but transformation. The comments flooding in were no longer just outrage. They were hope. This is how it should be. Finally, someone in power doing something real. Ariel Dawson for Senate. And at the center of it all, Ariel stood grounded, not triumphant, but steady. Because for her, this was never about revenge. It was about restoration. The roles had reversed, but the mission had only just begun. As the echo of the final applause faded, and Brent Wallace was quietly escorted through the revolving doors, he once believed he controlled a new air settled over the Avalon Regency, one that felt both somber and electric. Ariel Dawson stood in the center of it, her heels planted on the same marble floor where she'd been humiliated just hours before, only now she wasn't standing alone. Behind her, the faces of guests, employees, and bystanders reflected something greater than shock. They reflected belief in her, in what this moment meant. But Ariel knew better than anyone that real change couldn't be confined to a single act of accountability. She hadn't built a hospitality empire just to punish a few small-minded staff. She had built it to rewrite an industry's unspoken rules. She turned to Lorraine King and Eliza Monroe, her voice even unshaken. This isn't over. It starts now. I want a full internal audit not just of Avalon, but of every Skyline property nationwide. I want patterns. I want reports of complaints previously dismissed. We're not cleaning a lobby. We're cleansing the foundation. Lorraine nodded. We'll initiate full transparency protocols. Guest feedback will no longer die in inboxes. And Eliza, still stunned by the honor and responsibility she had been given, simply said, whatever it takes. Outside, the story was already spreading. Jenna Morales' live stream had gone viral across platforms. News outlets picked it up within minutes. Headlines blared, Black CEO expels racist staff from her own hotel. Change starts here. But Ariel didn't look at the cameras anymore. Her gaze was forward. toward what came next. The next morning, a formal letter from Ariel was published on Skyline's website and sent to every employee in the chain. It read, in part, "Prejudice disguised as protocol will no longer hide within our walls. If you have been silenced, know this, we are listening now. If you have silenced others, know this, we are watching." Skyline does not exist to protect power. It exists to serve with integrity. That message, in its simplicity and force, lit a fire. Staff from hotels across the country began submitting stories, experiences, confessions. Some painful, some brave. A movement had begun not of vengeance, but of reckoning and repair. Weeks later, a new training program, co-designed by Eliza, and a panel of inclusion experts was launched across Skyline properties. Anonymous reporting systems were embedded into every office. Regional directors were reshuffled. Patrick Harris, whose name had surfaced in Brent's last desperate plea, was formally dismissed after an internal investigation. No one, no matter their rank, was safe from scrutiny. The media called it the Dawson Doctrine. But Ariel didn't want credit. She wanted culture. She wanted every future guest to walk into a Skyline hotel and feel something unspoken but undeniable. You belong here. From shame had risen something greater than justice. It was systemic change. And in that, Ariel Dawson had not just reclaimed her lobby. She had reclaimed the future. In the heart of Boston's luxury district, a powerful story unfolded, one that would shake not only the foundations of a hotel lobby, but the very conscience of an entire industry. Ariel Dawson, a quiet yet commanding black woman dressed in simplicity, walked into her own hotel, the Avalon Regency, and was met not with warmth or welcome, but with scorn, prejudice, and dismissal. The staff didn't see her identity, her worth, or her ownership. They saw only the surface. And that was their greatest mistake. Within minutes, what began as an attempt to degrade a woman based on assumptions spiraled into a public reckoning. What they didn't know was that Ariel wasn't just a guest, she was the CEO, the very person who built the chain they were representing. And with her calm resolve, quiet strength, and unflinching dignity, she not only fired the staff who wronged her, but initiated sweeping reforms that would echo across the hospitality world. With allies like Eliza Monroe and voices like Jenna Morales capturing every truth, Ariel didn't just fight back, she led forward. This story is not just about humiliation and justice. It's about transformation. It's about standing your ground when the world tells you to move. It's about choosing accountability over revenge values, over vanity, and change over comfort. Ariel Dawson reminded us all that true leadership is not about asserting dominance. It's about creating space for dignity, for truth, and for every unheard voice. So what lesson do we take with us? That we must never assume we know someone's worth by their appearance. That the quietest person in the room might hold the most power. And that when injustice is met with courage, real change becomes possible, not just in hotels or offices, but in our homes, communities, and everyday interactions. If Ariel's story moved, inspired you, or made you think deeper, don't let it stop here. Like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel so we can keep telling stories that matter. Your support gives us the strength to uncover more truth, more hope, and more reasons to believe in a better, more just world. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.